Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Get Stuck on Sports TV edition right here on Thumb Coast TV. I'm Brady Beedon, he's Dennis Stuckey. And Dennis, baseball is in full swing. Unfortunately, for a lot of our MAC teams, it has not gone the way we've wanted it to. We'll start where we normally do at Port Huron Northern. They drop a series to L'Anse Creuse last week. They are now 3-6 in league, 7-14 overall. When Taylor Falls is on the mound, he's been fantastic. In fact, you can make an argument he's been the player of the year so far. But in every other game, they have struggled mightily.
Yeah, and this was a disappointment because this is a series where I thought we'd be talking about the Huskies at least winning the series and possibly having a chance for a sweep. Now, I know that once you get past Falls and maybe Hills, there's a little bit of a drop-off in pitching, but I still feel like there's enough here that they should be winning more than they have been. Like, my expectations for this team was a little higher. Falls has been fantastic. Fletcher's having a big year at the plate. He's a solid catcher. I don't know why the Huskies can't put it together.
And it's been a little bit, sometimes it's offense, sometimes it's defense. They had some personnel turnover at the beginning of the season. It just feels like they haven't been able to string together some wins and really get some confidence going. But they struggled this past week against L'Anse Creuse. PH, they got beat up by Fraser. Now, Fraser's a good team.
Solid, yeah.
But they get swept. They had a game where PH, they scored 10 runs but lost 15-10. They gave up over 40 runs in this series, and that was a departure from what they had done all year long, where they hadn't been scoring a lot of runs, but they also hadn't been giving up a lot. It was just a week to forget for the Red Hawks.
Yeah, they had the one day was tough. They gave up 34 runs, I think it was, in 2 games. And that's obviously too much.
Oh, yeah, that's more than, you're never going to win with that. They had been playing a bit better. They were on a 3-game winning streak, actually, going into that series. Yeah, that ended pretty quickly.
Yeah, and again, I think part of that is Fraser's a pretty good team, so I want to give them their due. But also, that's just a big drop-off for PH when it looked like they were maybe putting something together and getting some confidence going.
Hopefully they can bounce back this week, although it doesn't get any easier. Lakeview on the docket for the Red Hawks. They are undefeated in the MAC Blue because they just swept Marysville. And even if Marysville gets a game in this series, you feel like you have a chance you can at least hope in the last 2 weeks of league play to get a little bit of help. They get swept. They dropped to 4-5 in league play. And in fact, Marysville has only won 4 games on the season. So they needed a little bit of a boost there. They don't get it. And for the second straight year at least, they are swept by Lakeview.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to think that Lakeview might be the top team in the league. They've got Fraser still, but my gut feel is they're the best team. Marysville, unlike a lot of other teams who are kind of banged up at this time of the year, they're starting to actually get healthier, and hopefully that will help them turn things around.
Well, they have a series coming up against L'Anse Creuse where I think they really need to prove something. They really need to put their foot down and show that we're better than what we've been playing as, that the sweep to Lakeview hurt, losing 2 or 3 to Fraser hurt because a couple of those games were winnable, that they need to find a way to build a little bit of continuity going into the last 2 weeks and then eventually the postseason, because once we get to a little later in the month when we talk about districts, Marysville is going to be the 5th best team in their district of 5.
Yeah, well, again, and we said it with Northern. This is a series where I feel like Marysville's the better team, but, L'Anse Creuse proved me wrong last week. I hope they don't prove me wrong this week.
We'll go up to the MAC White where St. Clair, they dropped the series to Utica. This one was one I was hoping that St. Clair could take 2 of 3. They got a Game 1 win, 7-6, and then dropped a doubleheader against the Chieftains down at Utica. The first week of the season, they swept L'Anse Creuse North. That was a good win. Then they got swept by Grosse Pointe South. and it wasn't very competitive. So this was kind of the rubber series to see, all right, is St. Clair more week 1 or more week 2? And dropping 2 says it leans a little more to week 2. Now they'll get a chance to bounce back this week against the down Grosse Pointe North team, but I would have liked to have seen them at least take 2 or 3.
Well, I mean, when you win the first game of the series, you like to think that you can get a split in the remaining games. It didn't happen for them, but to me, this is a bigger week because, like you said, this is a Grosse Pointe North team that's struggling. The Saints need to take advantage of this and get some wins.
They do, because they have some talent in there. They have the pitching available to win some games. And, you know, you had such a good start. You don't want to soil it by losing 3 straight series. And then that confidence that we felt like they had starts to waver a little bit. And you're playing a team that, frankly, you should probably sweep. This is not a Grosse Pointe North team like we've seen the last handful of seasons. This is one that's ripe for the picking.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, getting everybody on the same page, and you know, some days you pitch, some days you hit. You need to get those 2 things going at the same time, and you always need to play good defense. It's an old story, but we say it all the time because it's the truth.
Down in the MAC Gold, Cousino ended up taking the series from Marine City, and that hurts the Mariners. That puts them 2 games back with 6 to go. Now, the good news is for Marine City, they've played the 3 top teams in the league, Cousino, Lamphere, and Lakeshore. They get Tower and Roseville, 2 teams that they should be able to take 5 or 6 games of the final 6 from, while the rest battle. But dropping 2 or 3 to Cousino makes it real tough for them to try to win a 4th straight league title.
Well, the one thing that they've got going for them is Cousino and Lamphere have to play each other, so somebody's going to win that series. You hope, actually, for them, since they beat Lamphere in their series, you want Lamphere to beat Cousino. And I'm going to give Cousino credit because I didn't think they were this good, but they proved me wrong. The Mariner bats were cold in the first 2 games of the series, came to life to at least salvage a win, and that will be an important win for them. But Marine City's got to think 6-0. They got to go 6-0 in the next 6 games.
They do, because that's jumbled up. The BWAC on the baseball side is jumbled up. Armada and Algonac played a series, Dennis, you were at. This was pivotal and ended up being a split, but Algonac kind of comes out ahead a little bit, at least in the standings, but they're getting beat up.
They're getting beat up. Simpson is injured, and it doesn't look good. There's a cast on his throwing hand, so I don't know when or if he'll be back. Verkaman took a shot off the shin, and he missed this past weekend. Hopefully that's all it's going to be and that he'll be back because all of a sudden the deepest pitching staff in the area is suddenly thin.
Yeah, very thin. Now, they were able to get a Game 1 win over Armada 6-3. Game 2 wasn't as pretty, a 12-2 loss to Armada. Algonac still in first, but again, it feels like they're reeling.
Yeah, and Game 2 was weird. And both teams are playing in the same conditions, but the sun was setting. It was right in the outfielders' eyes, and Armada was hitting the ball in the air, and guys were losing it in the sun, and it led to a lot of big extra base hits for Armada, and they kind of blew the game open in Game 2. After Game 1, Armada jumped out to an early lead on a 3-run homer from Hill, and then they didn't hit the rest of the. I don't know how Cole Thaler went all the way, but he went all the way. He threw a ton of pitches. He pitched in traffic, but he just got it done.
So that put Algonac at 6-2, Armada 5-3 now in BWAC play. North Branch got a sweep of Craw's Lex. They're 6-2 as well. They are really rolling. They win 12-3 and 11-7. They can hit with them, and they've had some names really pop up. And the one that really stand out, Jaden Hutchinson, we knew was pretty good, but Andrew Jerome is a name that we feel like we're saying every single time. Feels like he has a double a game, and North Branch is starting to build some momentum. Now they have to play they have the toughest remaining schedule in the BWAC, and that starts with Algonac this week.
Yeah, that'll be a big series. Actually, I think a big series for both those teams. And again, sometimes it's not who you play, Brady. It's when you play them, and North Branch might be catching Algonac at a good time.
Well, yeah, because you're probably not going to see two of their top three pitchers.
And if you can figure out a way to sweep, now it's North Branch that everybody's chasing.
Well, Richmond, they started 1-3. They've won 4 straight in the league. They're now 5-3 after sweeping Emily City 13-1 and then 4-3. Emily City, again, has been better. It just hasn't shown in the BWAC standings. But Richmond, they got some of their tough series out of the way early. They've played Armada. They've played Algonac. And now they're just trying to keep pace with everyone and build back up. They will match up with Almont this week, but they're a team that, Dennis, you've been saying you could see them really get hot and maybe climb up and steal this BWAC after a really rough start out of the gates.
I think they're really dangerous, and I'm sure they're focused on taking care of their own problems. But they're one side that they're hoping North Branch and Algonac split, and they can continue to gain ground.
Because, again, they just keep on keeping on. They might not have the most dominant pitching, but they can hit. And they continue that into the weekend with a couple of non-conference wins where they put up 20 total runs in 2 games. This is a team that can rake and is doing so right now. Yale and Almont split. Yale took the first game 10-9, and then they actually pushed the next game to the following day where Almont got the 9-4 win. Almont 4-4, they have an outside chance, but probably not. They'd have to be perfect the rest of the way. And with the loss, Yale goes to 3-5. I don't see the BWAC champion being 9-5.
No, but Yale's been consistent at being 500. They split with everybody, so they're obviously not an easy team to deal with. And with Almont, I think if they want to stay in it, they can't lose again.
No, they're going to have to be perfect. And while it's not impossible, improbable that Almont goes 6-0 down the stretch. Now, if they can start with a sweep of Richmond, now you get a little more interested with only 4 games left to go. Yeah, any team can rattle off 4 in a row at that point.
Yeah.
Cardinal Mooney finally got back in action after a long time off. It started on Tuesday when they got a sweep over Ann Arbor Gabriel Richard, 14-4 and then 2-0. Finally back in action. They're going to play something stupid like 10 league games in 11 days. And then they followed it up with a split of Liggett in their league, the number 1 ranked team in D3, beat them 2-1 and then lost 1-0. Errors and walks hurt them in the second game, but Mooney is picked up right where we kind of hoped they would be. They're playing some very good baseball right now.
They came back from their break and they used up all their hits in the first game, and the last 3 runs have been at a premium. But we always knew that their pitching was good and that they had a lot of depth with their pitching. And the last 3 games, they've thrown the ball very well, except for that one statistic, the 9 walks in the one game.
Yeah, because they only gave up.
That's just too many.
In the 1-0 loss to Liggett, they only gave up 1 hit. There were 2 total hits in the game, 1 for each side, and 9 walks is what sunk them. But Dennis, it actually gives me a lot of confidence because I don't think they're going to walk 9 in a lot of outings. I think they're just going to be fine continuing to roll on. That they're going to be dangerous in D4. There's not a lot of teams that, 1, play the schedule they play in D3 or D4, and 2, the talent is showing up here, that they have the pitching to make a run, they have the bats to make a run, and they're going to make a run at the Catholic League title first, but they're not playing many teams that they would even see in the postseason. They're playing up, and they're punching with the heavyweights.
Yes. Yeah, they've not been embarrassed by anybody, and I don't think they will be the remainder of the way.
So they'll have a lot coming up this week, a lot of Catholic League doubleheaders to set them up for the rest of the season. That'll do it for baseball. We'll be talking about softball as some teams continue to shine. Port Huron Northern has been immaculate so far this year. St. Clair and Marysville finally matched up, and Richmond just continues to be Richmond. We'll talk about all that and more when we come back here on the Get Stuck on Sports TV edition, right here on Thumbcoast TV.
From doctor's appointments to work, shopping, and dining adventures, Blue Water Area Transit buses are the lifeline of our community. Depend on us for a ride that connects you to life's essentials. Blue Water Area Transit. Ride the wave.
Riding the bus will avoid the hustle and save you lots of dough. Road rage, don't chance it. Ride Blue Water Transit everywhere you go.
Welcome back to the Get Stuck on Sports TV edition right here on Thumb Coast TV. Brady Beedon, Dennis Stuckey. Let's talk softball because the Port Huron Northern Huskies over the last couple of weeks, while they may not be the story of the season because Marysville, St. Clair, and Richmond have been incredible, they're entering that conversation. I think we can safely say they have a seat at the dinner table now after another strong week. They mashed against Warren Woods Tower. They mashed against L'Anse Cruz. They mashed against the MAC Red opponent in Utica Ford. They're 13-1-1, and they are hitting as well as maybe any team in the area, sans Marysville.
Yeah, I mean they're knocking it around. There's no hole in their lineup, 1 through 9. They all put the bat on the ball. They've got a little more power than they've had in the past. Charlie Betts is hitting the ball over the fence. Adeline Jones, a freshman, in fact, they're both freshmen, can hit the ball over the fence. I saw Cristiano hit an absolute bomb the other day. She's hit a couple home runs. So that's 3 freshmen leading the power rush. Plus, you got that nice mixture of veterans with Falco and the Hagens and the Ramos. This is a team that's got some good balance. They're getting some pitching for the first time in a few years, and we always knew that they could hit. And they're scoring runs at an alarming rate. Yeah, they're very quietly. I think it's helped them to kind of fly under the radar. Everybody's paying attention to, Marysville and St. Clair, they're in a battle for a league title, and then they're going to play in a district, and, can anybody stop Richmond? Can anybody figure out Shoeboy and how to hit her? And quietly, there's Northern, 13-1-1, and just winning games. Now, some would argue they haven't had the toughest schedule. I would argue that they haven't lost since their second game of the season. And again, the 4 doubleheader sweep, to me, are 2 quality wins.
Very much so. Again, 13-1-1. And we said from the beginning of the year, their pitching doesn't have to be lights out. Give up 3 to 5 runs a game and you'll win most. And that's kind of what they've done. Very few shutouts. I mean, they have against some teams they probably should. But they'll give up 4 runs here, 5 runs there, a couple runs here. But when you're scoring 11, 12 runs a game, it doesn't matter. You know you can bounce back from it, and they have been incredible to start the year. Hope to continue that into the month of May. PH has been up and down. They are 6-7 overall, 5-2 in the Gold, so they still have a shot if they improve. But you've seen them a couple times over the past week. You saw them lose to Northern, where they struggled a bit. They won just a bomb fest with Lamphere as well. They're a team that you can just tell they need a little more seasoning on them.
Well, yeah, this is young. It's the first year for Coach Mullins. There's always that transition of how Kaz was there for a long time, so how they played his style to how they're playing this style now. They have young pitchers who I like. Mm-hmm. Walker, again, doesn't wow you with her stuff, but she works out of trouble. She gets her strikeouts when players are on base. And as long as they don't get in their own way, they're actually kind of a fun team. The problem is every once in a while they have that inning where they get the oopsies and they make a couple of errors and they can't seem to stop the avalanche. That's what happened to them against Northern. They were competitive into the 5th inning of that game, and then they dropped the ball a couple of times, and all of a sudden they're down 10 runs.
The hitting has been a little inconsistent as well against better pitching. So they've had to win some lower scoring games, and when you couple that with, it doesn't even have to be an avalanche of an inning. You have 1 or 2 errors, and now all of a sudden it's 4-1. Well, maybe we could have scraped across 1 run and then found a way to find a second one. But to get 3-4 runs, it just, against good pitching, has been hard for them to do. But they have been improved, and I like what I see from the Red Hawks. St. Clair and Marysville have just been at war all season long, and we finally got to see it in person. And round one of this 3-round bout went decisively to the Saints.
Yeah, they were the better team on that particular day. It was at St. Clair. They won 8-4. I thought they dominated the game. I thought they had more energy. I think it helped that the wind was blowing in that day. Although both teams can mash, Marysville lives on the 3-run home run. They get a bunch of them. It was tough that day. You weren't going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. And I just thought the Saints that day were the better team. McFarland was just a little bit better than Quayne. And the top three for the Saints are really tough to keep off the base paths.
Yeah, and they showed. I thought their veteran presence showed a little more than maybe a little bit of the youthful side of Marysville was a difference there. Now, St. Clair 6-0 in the MAC White. Marysville actually dropped a second game in league, maybe a bit of an emotional hangover, an 11-10 loss to L'Anse Creuse North. Puts them 2 games back, so if they want to get a piece of that MAC White title, they're going to need some help. They can knock off St. Clair once, but then someone else has to get them a second time. They bounced back against Marine City, and they hit 1,000 home runs. They cured what ailed them. They'll get back into the groove this week. I expect a strong week from Marysville, and I expect a strong week from St. Clair coming up. They play L'Anse Creuse North. They play Lakeview. L'Anse Creuse North, could they beat St. Clair? Yeah, they could, but I don't expect them to upset 2 of the top teams in the White.
No, I don't. I think the Saints league now, they hold destiny in their own hands. And in fact, if they can get the second win over Marysville and they meet on the 12th, if the Saints win that one, they're going to win the league championship.
Well, yeah, that's
Marysville's only chance is to win that game. And even if they do, the Saints are still probably going to hold them off because probably both teams will win out and the Saints will win the league by a game.
That's the most likely scenario at this point. Marine City also back in the MAC Blue where Northern is running things. They're 4-1 in league. Now they had a series canceled with Grosse Pointe South, who's only played 3 league games. They've had some illness going through, or at least we've heard have had some illness going through the locker room. So they're going to have to catch up in league games, but in the Blue, their only loss is to Northern, and they've played some very tough non-conference games. That's why they're only 8-7 overall. But I would say a pretty promising first 15 for the Mariners.
Yeah, and they were fairly competitive in the second game. The scores don't indicate how well they played against Marysville. Game 1, they got kind of handled. But in Game 2, they were up 3-2 in the 5th inning. And all of a sudden, they gave up 12 runs in the last 2 innings. So they kind of ran out of gas there. And it starts with they struggled in the circle that day. And occasionally, they're a team that can't outlast their mistakes or outslug their mistakes like they could last year. But there's still some good bats in this lineup. Big fan of Reese Atkinson.
She's had a nice season for them, and that's when we expected that needed to step up. Let's go to the BWAC, and we'll start with Richmond. They're going to run away with the BWAC. Right now, they're 8-0. They have a 3-game lead on both Algonac and North Branch. Mathematically, they have not clinched. They've clinched. They're not losing 3 games.
I just don't see it happening. Every time we go, okay, here's a lineup that might be able to do something, and then Shoeboy just shuts it down.
10-0 and 13-3 over Emily City, who they've struggled. They are now 2-11. No, they might not be what we hoped they could be, but they're better than 2-11, aren't they?
I thought so. I really thought going in that they were going to emerge as the second best team behind Richmond, and it just hasn't happened. And it was just a snowball. It started with losses to Algonac, and then North Branch got them, and they just haven't been able to get on track. And I don't know what it is. because there's a lot of talent there. There are good players. They were good last year with pretty much the same team. They brought a lot of people back, and I don't know why they haven't been able to put it together.
Speaking of Algonac, they split with Armada. 5-2 in Game 1, Algonac got the win. The fact that Armada got a split doesn't surprise me. The fact that they made it 16-6 in Game 2 is a little surprising because Armada's offense had been very quiet. Remember, they were just completely shut down by Richmond. I don't think they scored a run in the doubleheader. And then they explode for 16 runs to get back on track. And it's like, okay, that's kind of what I thought a few weeks ago, but then you went down a little bit, and then you explode and get the split over Algonac.
You know, unless it's Nolan Ryan, after you face Shoeboy, I would think anybody you face seems a lot easier.
They're 4-4 in league play. They're a nice team. I like them. They have some really nice young bats, along with a few veteran players. Capozzo's been around a while. The problem for them is right now the league's out of reach. For Armada, it's all got to be about how do we get ready for the postseason and find a way on one day to be better than Richmond.
Yeah, and that's going to be tough because I know last year and this year, the last 4 times they've faced Katie Shoeboy, they have not been able to figure it out.
Not many teams have, so it's not an Armada problem.
But they have really struggled. Like
Algonac, you've been saying it for a couple weeks. You're waiting them to rip off half a dozen wins and go, wow, look at this. This is the 6th, 7th straight win in a row for Algonac. So they split with Armada, and then over the weekend, they lose to Utica, a middling team in the MAC White, who's not a bad team, but a team you'd hope Algonac would take care of. And then they beat Anchor Bay, who's battling for a MAC Red title.
Yeah, it's hard to explain. My best explanation for it, because I think J.C. Reams has pitched a lot better as the season has gone along. She's gotten better. They've always been able to hit, but they have not been consistent defensively. And again, it seems like when they make a mistake, it almost always leads to a big inning.
Yeah, they don't just, it's not made an error, and then the next girl pops up to short, and you're fine. No big deal. North Branch swept Croslex. Game 1 was close, 8-7, and then 17-0. North Branch brought out the hit and sticks. They're second in the BWAC right now. They'll match up with Algonac this week to see who is number 2 in the league, and that's kind of what everyone else is playing for right now.
Yeah, and that's for that reason, that's a big series. I think it's a big series for both those teams just to see where they're at and who they are.
Exactly, because can Algonac continue to make plays? And a North Branch team that had to replace some players is actually having a better regular season this year than they did last year. Because remember, the month of May went disastrous for the Broncos last year. Last year in BWAC play, North Branch finished 6-8. They ended up going to the semifinals and were competitive in a semifinal game. This year they're 5-3. So they had a better regular season than the team last year that went to Michigan State.
Yeah, it's hard to explain other than Deshetsky was the key last year, and obviously she's graduated and moved on. She struggled in the circle during the season, and then the end of the season, she figured it out, and we knew that there was a really good player there, and she was a really good player come postseason.
Almont and Yale split a doubleheader. Yale took game 1 4-2, and then Almont bombed 19 runs in a 19-9 win. Almont scoring runs. Their bats are starting to wake up a little bit as the Raiders are trying to have a strong finish to the season. They're not going to win a league title, but they're 4-4. And they could be a top half team.
I think this is a pretty good softball team. We didn't know a ton about them going into the season. And actually, there's a couple of people in their lineup that I had actually thought had graduated. But they're back. And Algonac actually, or Almont has a legit lineup. The question was going to be pitching, and Gemmel has stepped up. And finally, that promise that we were told about a couple of years ago, that watch out, Gemmel's a good pitcher, and then she kind of fell off the map for a little while, and we lost her in the shuffle. but she's back this year, and they're doing a really good job.
BUAC series this week, Yale and Armada, Croslex, Emily City, Richmond, Almont, and we mentioned earlier, Algonac and North Branch. Kind of like most of those matchups.
Yeah, it'll be a fun week.
Yes, it will be, and we will be back next week to talk about everything that happened, both baseball and softball, as league races will be a little more clear. We're actually getting pretty close to that finish line of the regular season. Talk about all that and more next week when we are back here on the Get Stuck on Sports TV edition, right here on Thumb Coast TV.